Whoever you are, wherever you are, as you tune into this episode of the podcast, welcome. But if you're at home, I want you to grab yourself a cup of tea, a notepad, and a pen, and make some notes. If you're listening to this and you're driving or you're in a gym, make some mental notes. And at the first opportunity, and I mean the first opportunity, write down the mental notes. There is so much value in this episode. I cannot wait for you to get this value. So let's jump straight in. Rick, thank you for taking the time,
No
mate.
problem.
Rick is at 8 Financial Planning. Look, I appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation on this.
No, absolutely happy to. This is a really important area. I mean, the nature of our work means we only look after a small group of actual clients, but there's really useful stuff here that actually lots of people can get value from. So if we can use media like this to be able to kind of spread the message about financial planning, it's only a good thing. So yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Why don't you give everyone kind of like listening a bit more of a kind of indication of how you got into financial planning and what you do currently?
Sure, absolutely. So kind of straight out of university, I joined HSBC Bank, and so HSBC of a management trainee program. I had visions of like Canary Wharf and kind of boardrooms, but I got the complete opposite. I spent the first year with an actual clipboard and a pen, greeting clients as they walked into Manchester King Street branch. And so the idea is it was a really good grounding, because what was absolutely clear is if you want to deliver financial planning advice, the most important part, aside from the technical knowledge, is your ability to be able to actually communicate it. And so that was a
Mm,
really good opportunity just to actually understand how you've got to relate to clients regardless of their backgrounds, regardless of their ages. And so I found that really useful. Having done quite a few months there and actually really enjoying it, I then I then moved into personal banking, commercial banking, corporate banking. I worked within their investment banking section, and then for the last few years, I actually trained up as a fully regulated financial advisor, fully looking after HSBC clients. But I mean, the very nature of working for a large corporate is I was looking
mhm.
after hundreds of clients, and they had pretty complex needs. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm in this meeting now. I've got three more meetings. I've got five more clients waiting for a call. And this is really important work. And so the actual idea around being able to step away and do this work independently. And what was really critical for me is to do this with a much smaller group of clients in a much more deeper and meaningful way. And so setting up a completely independent, directly authorized FCA regulated firm allowed me the kind of time and space to be able to build an advice business in the way that I would have liked, as opposed to having to make compromises when you work
Yeah.
alongside someone.
I can imagine if you're kind of like in HSBC and you, like you say, you have 100 clients. I don't imagine that, and I've certainly been in firms where
Absolutely.
you have so many clients, you can't really pay as much attention to them as much as you would, particularly in a corporate, because
Mm,
then you're going to have like contact targets. You've got to
absolutely.
speak to X amount of people, new business commitments that
Mm.
you need to bring in, plus existing customers that you need to have a look after. It can be really overwhelming.
Yeah, absolutely. But I am actually really kind of grateful for that actual grounding, because I kind of still have in me a level of I need to do a certain level of actual activity, because there's no one
Hmm.
measuring my actual performance now, and we're purely measured on our outcomes. It's still really good grounding to have that sense of kind of almost kind of urgency to say, I need to see a certain number of clients. Whenever somebody gets in touch, we absolutely will give them a call back, because there's a massive opportunity here, and
Hmm.
further opportunity may actually come from that. So, yeah, I'm really
Yeah.
grateful, but then I'm really pleased to have moved on.
Yeah, that's where the corporate trading does kind of come into hand, because like I'm a firm believer, if you have had the opportunity to work in the corporate land
Yeah.
for a corporate business, those kind of like day-to-day responsibilities that you're tasked with,
Mm,
when you turn it into your own business, is actually quite powerful because you get the routing of what is required from a business point of view to be kind of like successful and to get runway through, or at least have an ongoing flow for your business that you know you're able to kind of like build upon really. So it's people often frown on corporate work, but I'm just like, listen, it's training ground
Yeah.
at the end of the day, so take advantage of it as
Absolutely.
much as you can.
Yeah. I've
Yeah.
say I often like come across kind of saying stuff, oh gosh, I wish I'd actually done this sooner. But 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 I'm really glad I kind of took that slow and steady approach to get to this, because it meant when we did set up a firm, we had a really clear understanding. Whereas I think if I'd done that 5, 10 years ago, I think we'd just be muddling through. So yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. So, the first question I have for you on this idea of kind of like financial planning. Financial planning as a term is always something that is associated with financial advisors. And I think one of the things that I want to get across in this conversation is you have the financial planning that a financial advisor would do, but it's also important to have a financial plan. So, what does it mean to have a financial plan, and how does that kind of connect with what you do professionally
Yeah.
when it comes to your role in financial planning for clients?
Well, absolutely. I think one of the things we were really keen to do is almost drop the term financial advice, because
Hmm.
in my head, and really the majority of actual clients, IFA financial advisor, I would say is a product sales role. And so my
Hmm.
actual HSBC days, I absolutely did the whole financial advice, the whole financial advice thing, where we're essentially looking at the products and solutions we can offer and finding clients that would actually fit. Whereas actually
Hmm.
now we've intentionally, and we really obsess over the term financial planning, because we are all about strategy now. Products and services may or may not come into the mix. And so we have actual clients where we haven't recommended any products, any new funds, any new ISAs, any new pensions. What we've absolutely focused on is the actual strategy. And so financial
Mm.
planning, I would say the biggest difference is kind of thinking shorter term, day to day on your finances, or having this longer term plan. And actually, when you've got a longer term plan, you've got something to aim towards. So if you are focused on saving, if you are regularly contributing to your pensions and your ISAs, it's really important to understand why and what will be the impact of that. And financial planning allows us to actually do that, because we can say to clients, rather than you need to put £1,000 a month into your investments, it will take the conversation from, if you put £1,000 a month into your investment, you are going to step back. You're going to step back from work 7 years early, and as soon as you step back from work, you're going to be spending an extra £1,000 every single month. And when you kind
Mhm.
of, and bear in mind, it's always personalized to the actual client. So if they've got aspirations about sending their children into private school, funding university, funding a once in a lifetime holiday, we make it all about that. And so financial planning allows us to aim towards that. And so it just gives it complete meaning and depth when it comes to your investments.
Yeah. It's interesting when you put it that way because across 4 years doing this now, one of the things that I always skim at the top of my lungs is having a plan, having an
Mm,
idea of what you're doing this for, your why, and being really, really clear on that. Because I truly believe it gives you that something to focus on. And behind that, you obviously need a little bit of discipline if you're working toward goals. But I find that sometimes people aren't able to kind of put a concrete
mm,
mark on the board around this is my goal.
yeah.
So interesting because you've been doing this for a while. I'd love to know what are some of the most common goals that you find that your clients kind of plan towards. Because for people who will be watching this or and listening to this, they may not necessarily have a financial advisor, but they'll
Mm,
still be asking the question of, okay, so what what is a goal? What might be a goal that you would work towards? You hear early retirement is a really, really big, common one.
Yeah.
Saving for school fees for kids is also another one. But what kind of variations do you find?
So, yeah, I mean, I mean, what I've noticed, especially post COVID, is there is definitely a move towards financial independence as opposed to
Hmm.
simply leaving work early. And so often the most kind of prevalent goal we actually tend to find is actually being able to step back from work and be able to retire. But the kind of clients we have, the majority of them are actually business owners, and and
Okay.
actually they really enjoy work. They have kind of meaning from it. They're able to create wealth. They're able to create employment opportunities. And so the idea is they definitely don't hate their actual jobs. So the idea of leaving as soon as possible doesn't really appeal to. However, this concept of financial independence and the real kind of difference is work becomes a choice rather than a financial need. As soon as that
Hmm.
happens, everything changes. All the politics around work suddenly they don't mean anything because work is a choice rather than an actual need. If they want to go part time, if they want to begin consulting and working on projects that are of interest to them, absolutely, this is what financial independence allows. And so we've got a lot of clients who are very much aspiring to financial independence so that suddenly, like I said, work is a choice rather than a financial need. But it's also really important. A lot of these are kind of longer term goals. And so shorter term goals are really, really important because something we really advocate on is not simply building wealth for the sake of it. We often say to our clients, your biggest asset isn't the value of your business or your home or your ISAs or pensions. Your biggest asset is time and health. And so because of that, a
Mm.
lot of our goals, we would encourage clients to have bucket lists and be able to actually put dates and actual amounts around these. And so often once in a lifetime holidays absolutely feature private schooling, university, but the idea of creating time to be able to volunteer, to be able to take up new hobbies and interests. They're all very much in there. So I think this actual conventional thinking of let's just retire early, I think it is definitely evolving.
Yeah, I've always found that idea of retire early as like really
Hmm.
vague. As like, okay, what does that look
Yeah,
like exactly? And I think a lot of, well, in my experience at least, sometimes when you have conversations with people about that and you ask them the detail, they've not really thought about it. So it's interesting to hear your approach where you talk about having those short term
hmm,
goals that are in place and they might be bucket list items to really focus the mind.
absolutely.
Because it's a journey, isn't it? At the end of the day, you're going to have maybe pit stops along that. So that bucket list is kind of like a pit stop to reinforce that longer term goal, which is a big psychological factor, really, in that journey. And it's interesting to hear that as something that you do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I said, the really important part to our role is in these first initial meetings, it is just to shut up and to be able to listen and actually ask really interesting questions. Things like, what was money like growing up? What are your
Mm,
what are your concerns? What is keeping you up at night when it comes to your finances? What would your ideal financial future look like? And to be fair, a lot of the time people are there with their pension statement just like ready to hand it over. I'm like, no, no, no. The pension's really important, but what it's going to allow you to do is even more important. So we're really interested in actually understanding the individual before we understand all of their finances, because then giving them advice is actually really easy because it's built specifically around that individual, and we just couldn't give them advice around goals and long-term planning if we don't understand what they're fundamentally about and what is important
hmm.
to them. because then it means whatever advice we go on to give sticks because it's built around them.
Around
Yeah.
something. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to ask this question looking at kind of like the broad spectrum and thinking about the people that kind of listen and
Oh,
watch the show. This idea of having a financial plan and being clear of what your goals are, maybe having some short-term bucket list things that get you on the road to that, reinforce your journey. I think a lot of people like the
yeah.
idea of, yeah, financial planning, maybe doing some financial planning sounds good. But I think one of the key things that I keep hearing over the past maybe couple of years, certainly since COVID lockdown, is, well, at what level, when do you start having these conversations around actually trying to start a financial plan or get going with how you structure and look towards the future? Is there a certain income level that you have to be at to be able to do it, just generally speaking? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
What's
Yeah,
your
really,
opinion?
really interesting. I think I'm often sat in these actual meetings, and there's a little part of me like, I wish I'd spoken to you 15 years ago, because suddenly all of these things we are putting together now, if we'd done it a while ago, would be so much easier. All
Mm,
the heavy lifting when it comes to long-term investment planning is actually done through investment growth. But if we're starting late, a lot of the heavy lifting has to be done through the actual contributions. And so we are often going into schools, universities, and talking to them about the very basics of financial planning. And so, in answer to your question, the sooner you can start to do something positive and long term, the better. And so it isn't necessarily making massive investment contributions every single month. It's getting into the right habits. And so
mm,
the most successful clients who we work with have kind of developed longer term habits that as soon as wealth increases, all of their all of their habits kind of increase alongside that. And so the idea is
because they're already ingrained.
exactly, yeah. And so the idea
Yeah,
is being able to say, look, every single month, as soon as you get paid, you need to have a plan for that actual month. How much of that income is going to be pushed towards essential expenditure? How much is going to be pushed into non-essential expenditure? And it's really important to do that. By the way, it's important to have that short-term benefit from your income. But then can you get into the habit of a small proportion of that? Can that be automated into ISAs, pensions, savings? And the idea is if you can start that regardless of your age, regardless of your salary levels,
hmm,
because then if you're continually reviewing that, it's suddenly putting a mortgage into the mix doesn't doesn't throw the individual because they're already used to budgeting. And
absolutely.
and
Yeah,
the idea is by actually starting early, you will see the effect of compounding within your investments. And then it's really easy to say, well, hey, now that salary's increased, or now that some of the expenditures reduced, how about pushing more into that area? So I would say the sooner the
yeah,
better. And then
yeah.
there are definitely life kind of stages, whether that's getting married, whether that's buying your first home, whatever order that comes in, they are really important moments to stop and simply review and kind of reprioritize.
Yeah. I love that you've said all of that because, like, guys, if you've been listening to me for like 4 years, you'll recognize the pattern of what Rick has just described there. I talk about this
Yeah.
all the time. It's in my book. It's actually part of the formula in my book when we talk about really getting these
Mhm.
habits ingratiated
Yeah.
early. Like, one of the first things that you really need to understand how to do is make sure that you have good financial control. And I talk about the three buckets: your essential, your non essential, then your other. Like, those are three crucial things that you need these are all ideas and principles rooted in financial planning. And these are the keys to success that you need. And it's funny because we live in a world now where, I don't know if you would agree with this, Rick, people just assume, I can start to get a handle on my finances and do all of that basic habit stuff when I earn more money. And I'm like, if you can't do it when you're
Mm,
earning little, you're not going to do it when you earn a lot of money, because all of a sudden when you get to that point, you're going to do what I did and what most people do, is you'll end up blowing money on things that don't really matter, essentially wasting it because you've never had that kind of money before. So cultivating that habit way earlier means that not only are you starting with, investing in compounding and all that kind of stuff from a small
mm.
amount every single month, but as you get more money and make more money, you already have that habit ingratiated, so you can now start investing in a really meaningful way for the
Absolutely,
future.
completely agree. And the surreal thing is, I'll be sat there with like multi-millionaire clients with the same three pots. And so the idea is, and again, I'm putting this across, and it's blowing their minds. And I'm thinking, gosh, we should have done this sooner. And and the kind of almost opposite scenario, we've got clients who are on very modest incomes, very modest lifestyles, but have got these significantly large investment pots that they've just accumulated, and there hasn't been any massive inheritance. There hasn't been any actual event that has created this wealth. It's been a slow, steady build. But suddenly, it means they've got options because they started early
Hmm.
and they had all the right financial behaviors throughout. They've suddenly got all these amazing options, whether and that's and they've truly reached the point of financial independence. Work is truly a choice rather than a financial need. So they've been hugely rewarded for that patient, disciplined approach. And like I said, it didn't require massive incomes or massive inheritances. It simply needed that slow, disciplined approach to building wealth.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I'm really keen to get into some of the
Yeah,
practical stuff that you would kind of like do. So I want to run through like
yeah.
a case study that we spoke about maybe doing. And the whole point of this is to kind of hopefully pull out themes. And these are themes that you can translate whether you're earning really high at the level that we're going to start at, to whether you're earning 30, 40, 50,000 pounds a year. These themes will be important and things to really think about. So I did a video on YouTube about,
Mm,
I think about a month ago now. I delved into this idea of who the top 1% earners are. And we jumped into how much tax as a top 1% earner you would earn if you are employed via
yeah,
PAYE, right? So you're in a business, you're an employee, you're taxed at source, the money goes out. Now, it's really interesting when you go over those numbers. And if you haven't watched the video, it's worthwhile watching the video. But £180,000 puts you in the top 1% of earners. First and foremost, that boggles most people's mind, because you'll be thinking, well, hang on a second, you should surely be earning maybe £500,000 to be in the top 1% of earners. Actually, you don't. To be in the top 10% of earners, the threshold is about £50,000 a year. And for many people, I think they'll think, well, actually, that £50,000 a year doesn't make me feel rich. I feel like a normal person. And so the taxation and what you're left over with when you are at that top 1% is really interesting. I'll pop it on the screen right here. This is what the tax situation would actually look like. But what I'm really interested in here is, if you, Rick, had someone who's a top 1% earner, earning £180,000 a year, what are some of the first things that you look at and start to explore when you're approaching this idea of, okay, we want a
mm.
financial plan for the future? What are you looking at? Where do you
Absolutely.
start?
Can I just start by saying a couple of years back, 100 meeting an actual client who earns 180 grand plus would just automatically, as a be financial planner, be like, amazing. I've got all these opportunities. I can do all of this knowledge I can impart. But I often find the kind of reality is somebody earning that. and their net and their net pay and their disposable income are very, very different. We often find clients who are
Yes.
on these salaries have had significant lifestyle creep, whereby actually as a result of these salaries, they've got a significant amount of actual unsecured debts. They've got a significant amount of actual non-essential spending. And so as a result of that, immediately we're like, okay, let's just better understand the actual situation. But I mean, first, sorry, do you want to jump in there? Because you probably,
No, 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 no. I was gonna agree because I think it's really important to kind of stress that it doesn't matter whether you sit down with a financial planner or you try to financially plan yourself. If you're earning £180,000 and you don't have disposable income, you've got
yeah,
nothing to plan with. And so this kind of ties to what we were talking about earlier. You have to have those habits in place early so that you're not kind of like getting to this point where you're earning a load of money, but you've got a really big house, really big car, a load of debts, and you have no strong, functional,
mm,
practical financial management to the point where you have disposable income. So you need to have disposable income. So in my book, I talk about the non-essentials, the essentials, the other. You need to have a healthy amount of money going into your other pot, which will allow you to build for the future. If you don't have that, this is completely pointless. I thought I'd just make that point because that's what you were leading at, and I think you're spot on. Lifestyle creep
yeah,
is real. It really, really
absolutely.
is.
And it has a massive impact because for that individual to kind of know they're earning 180 plus, it automatically fills them with a sense of confidence, maybe bordering on kind of entitlement when it comes to private schooling, a certain standard of actual living. And yeah, absolutely. But we often find the clients who have had a slow, disciplined approach to their finances will will absolutely thrive in these situations because they will still have a significant amount of actual non-essential spending alongside regular disciplined investing saving. But I mean, in answer to your question, one of the first things we would do with an actual client who is in this scenario is I think we're all psychologically wired to just plan ahead and just assume that you'll continue on this kind of trajectory in terms of salary, in terms of health, in terms of life, in terms of lifestyle. So one of the first things we do from an independent, objective view is say, we need to protect everything you have built up so far. So the idea is
Mm,
this is where we start to delve into things like income protection, life insurance, critical illness cover, because we need to absolutely safeguard the lifestyle that has been built up so far. Often for somebody earning this level of actual salary, there'll be financial dependence, whether that is an actual spouse, children, extended family. And so because of that, we need to protect first. We then need to start to put in place some of the fundamentals. And we often find for clients in these scenarios, they don't often have much in terms of savings. Now, sometimes it is because,
mm. Why do you think that is, though, Rick? Why do
yeah,
you
so
think
the
that is, though?
idea is I often find it is either because they have taken they've taken a long-term patient approach to their investing. They've either prioritized all their investments and their pensions, or they have just not had the disposable income to be able to think savings. And maybe it's because they're so
Mm,
psychologically wired that there's another 5 grand that's going to hit my bank account in like a month's time. So they're almost living paycheck to paycheck, which sounds extraordinary when you think about that actual salary, but we often come across that. And so the idea is
yeah,
we will encourage them to build up a cash reserve.
that's interesting. And I
Sure.
have a question for you on this because the first thing you've mentioned there is protecting what you already have, which is something that in financial planning, that's what you naturally do. And there is a case study right now. I think if you've been paying attention to the news, um, Sir Bradley Wiggins, Olympic winner, cyclist, he legend in the sport, recently filed for bankruptcy, and he's going to have to sell his gold medals because he owes HMRC apparently £300,000. He's going to be homeless. He's going to be bankrupt. He has nothing for someone of that caliber. And I think it ties very nicely into this conversation here around protecting what you already have. There is a very common assumption around things like income protection, life insurance, critical illness, that it's all just a waste of money. And the saying goes, it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it, right? But psychologically, you have to kind of justify that
Yeah,
in your head if you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, hang on a second, I want to build wealth for the future. I want to have some financial security and some financial independence. This has got to be the first step that you look at, because protecting what you already have isn't necessarily about the future. It is about now so that you can
yeah,
build for the future. And so, my question to you, Rick, is how does that go down in conversation with clients
yeah.
that you speak to when they may be expecting you're going to do all this jaddy stuff with pensions and investments, but you're going back down to the basics of what's your life insurance, your critical illness, and your income protection? How is it
Absolutely. To be
received?
fair, it just absolutely throws clients because they have already walked into the office with this mindset of this is what I'm going to put, well, this is what I'm going to put in place, and it's always longer term. This is in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and I think, like I said, we're all psychologically wired to feel that we are invincible, that health is simply going to continue,
Hmm.
and we're just going to go on this trajectory of this actual journey of salary will be increasing, and this is what my lifestyle is going to be. And the thing we often say is, look, we are approaching this from a completely independent, objective perspective. And the reason why you have thought about working with a financial advisor or just getting someone's external view is you want someone to point out the areas you have missed. And so on the topic
Hmm.
of actual insurance itself, I don't know if in the past there was this really salesy approach to insurance. And so
Yeah,
somebody
yeah,
in an actual pinstripe suit, or like maybe you're just in your bank, and they suddenly try and kind of flog you
yeah,
personal loan protection, a packaged bank account. I don't know if that's done so much harm to people's psychology around this, but immediately there's a barrier. And the crazy thing is,
yeah.
we all insure our kind of mobile phones. We all insure our kind of
Hmm.
cars, these depreciating assets, or we all put this stuff in place. But if you had an actual ATM that was just every month you turn up, it would just give you 5.5 grand. You'd insure that. So taking the same
Yeah.
approach to your own finances. But like I said, it's a pretty psychologically, emotionally charged issue. There's this sense of you don't want to talk negative, right? The idea.
You don't want to think about the
Exactly.
worst
And
case
the and
scenario.
the I
Yeah,
and the idea
yeah.
of, oh, like how come we're talking about me becoming really unwell? How come we talk about me dying? Like it's the opposite of the optimistic longer term conversation you were expecting. But I mean, like I said,
Hmm.
we very much reiterate this with um, we're looking at this independently, objectively. On our cash flow planning, to visualize this, we often talk about salary, um, ISAs, pensions increasing. We then scenario plan, what if your income stopped? And straight away, the graph just drops. And so sometimes
Drops.
people
Yeah,
need to see this visually, or sometimes people need to feel it emotionally, whether that's sharing a personal story. We often find suddenly whenever there's like somebody who is really high profile who suddenly gets cancer, that like sometimes hits people.
that
But then
hits.
suddenly there's this
Yeah.
real kind of uptake of, hey, do you remember we had a conversation? Maybe we should look at that again. So I would say everyone takes very
Yeah.
unique, different approach to this. We all take on board information in a different way, whether that's visually, emotionally, whether you just need facts. But one of the things we do emphasize is if you put it in place now, it's significantly cheaper than if we put it in place in 5 years' time. And the other
Yes.
really important part,
Yes. Yes.
because it's
Yes.
subject to medical underwriting, we can put in place insurance based on your current state of health now. In 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, if that's different, it's going to be really difficult to have this insurance.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I like the analogy
Yeah,
used around the ATM because it's something I talk about all the time, right? There is so much narrative. And I ask people, and I say, look, you do realize that during your career, you're probably going to earn, you will
yeah,
earn millions of pounds through your working career. You'll earn millions. So if you knew that from the outset and you kind of had an inkling or an understanding of, by the way, maybe 1 in 4 people get cancer, or, you know, uh, the amount of people that are likely to suffer from a critical illness before actual dying, if you knew what the probabilities were, wouldn't you go ahead and try and protect that
yeah,
£1 million that you would earn? And when you put it that way, most people will be like, actually, yeah, of course you would. And it's the same kind of conversation that
yeah,
you're alluding to there. Like you are the asset going out to work to earn this cash. What happens if, through no fault of your own, something happens and you
yeah,
can't? That income stream stops. All of a sudden, any future plans that you have are
yeah,
put at jeopardy. So having that, I call it that bubble, right? That bubble around you to protect you, to ensure that you're not too far taken off your course, is really, really important in the equation. I mean, it might knock you off a little bit, but it's not going to put a
mm,
complete end to the journey that
absolutely.
you're on.
I mean, sometimes from a strategy perspective, when you're thinking longer term and you're understanding the individual, the psychology and the emotion around this, some of the actual strategies are, let's just say your kind of life insurance, income protection, critical illness is going to cost £200 a month. We would then, rather than take it from a client's income, and their kind of after tax amount that will hit their bank account every month, we will arrange for that to come out of their actual investment portfolio. So the idea is two
Nice.
hundred pounds a month is being debited out of that. Now, if they've got a sustainable kind of equity focused investment portfolio, the kind of cost of that will
I like
be
that.
will be pretty much, yeah.
I like that a lot.
So the idea is you're getting your investments to cover the cost of your insurance.
To
You're
pay for your
hedging your
cover.
bets, right? In terms of if things go really, really well,
Yeah.
you've got your investments to fall back on. And actually, if things do not go to plan and there's an issue, you've got this financial safety net, which has been covered by the investment.
Yeah. I think that's great on a couple of levels because number one, it's not coming
Yes.
out of the paycheck, so you're not physically seeing it as a monthly direct debit. It's coming from your investments, and
Mhm.
you have this beautiful thing where the investment is hopefully growing. So it's the return on the investment that is also protecting your
Absolutely.
lifestyle, your now essentially. I think that's a really nice way of looking at it and
Yeah,
structuring it.
absolutely. To make that even more palatable, a lot of our work is actually moving clients away from active, expensive investment portfolios. And so if we can say, look, as a result of our input, we've just taken £12,000 off the cost of your actual investment portfolio. So rather than just kind of leave that there, can we use half to, to then cover the cost of your
Hmm.
insurance? So something like that tends to
Hmm.
land well because it's almost seen as a cost,
Fantastic.
as like a cost neutral thing. Also, what I really like about some of the insurance providers now, rather than just them being there in the event of an actual claim, they are starting to put in place quite a few positive things. I mean, kind of Vitality is a really good example. And again, we're just independent. But
Yeah.
but kind of what I like, they've now switched on to, if we can make you healthier, you're going to be less likely to make a claim. So if we can incentivize you to be
Hmm.
healthier, something like that works. But even a lot of the standard insurers will actually give you annual health checks access to mental health support, access to virtual GPs, access to kind of nutrition support. So suddenly you're seeing the benefit of having this insurance, not just in worst case scenario, but on a day to day.
Day-to-day basis, yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool. So
Yeah,
protect what you've already got, first thing. You did allude to the fact that sometimes there isn't kind of like this savings buffer. So I'm assuming you're referring to something like,
yeah,
an emergency fund, making sure that there's ample money there to call upon if circumstances were to change. How do you do that from a practical view, and how is that received
yeah.
from a client point of view
Absolutely.
as
To be
well?
fair, it's a much easier conversation now because interest rates are actually pretty decent. And so if you shop around,
Yeah,
you can pick up at this moment in time between 4 and 5%. And so the idea is if we're starting to build up cash, it is much more palatable, especially somebody who is wired to be thinking investments only. Say, hey, look, if we can get 5% completely cost free, completely risk free from an actual
risk
short
free.
term perspective,
Yeah.
obviously inflation's going to wear that down. But if we can kind of take a proportion, and so we're often taking a proportion of existing investments, saying we need to move this to cash, which sounds counterproductive coming
Hmm.
from a financial advisor. But actually, if we've got some cash to fall back on, in a moment when you suddenly need to draw out some of your investments because let's just say you've got a holiday, you've got some kind of event where you suddenly need access to your money. If
Cash.
markets have fallen
Yeah.
at that moment in time, rather than make a difficult choice around, I'm going to have to access my investment when it's already dropped, it's going to have to work even harder to come back. If I can create a pot of
Yeah.
cash, then I've got some kind of emergency fund. And so the idea is there are certain rules of thumb. Some of them are, for example, six months worth of outgoings. But the I so
Hmm.
that's a really good starting point because that actual amount is then tailored to that individual. So rather than saying you need to have 5 grand to fall back on, you can tailor that to the individual's lifestyle by saying, look, let's have 6 months worth of outgoings. However, in certain cases, that amount needs to be higher, that amount needs to be lower. Something we factor into cash is your planned spending over the next 3 to 5 years. So if you say, look, I'm going to need to pay a chunk off my mortgage, or actually, I'm going to be changing my car, we'd also be recommending that is put into cash. And so again,
Hmm.
we really like premium bonds as something slightly kind of exciting to do with your
And
cash.
tax free as well.
Or
Yeah.
there are some really good
Yep.
savings accounts as long as they're financial services compensation scheme backed. The idea is we'll often guide clients to take advantage of these savings rates, and so then they have this kind of stability. So we talk about financial safety nets in terms of insurance. Then we talk about that kind of short-term stability that you suddenly lose your job, it's you've got something to fall back on.
It's not
Exactly.
all panic
And
stations.
then
Yeah.
and then we can
Absolutely.
start. It's from that solid foundation we can start longer term planning.
Yeah. The way I see this, and you've explained it brilliantly there, the whole equation of you don't want to touch your investment because it might be down. You want to create that protection. You're kind of you are you're giving yourself a little bit of a cushion between you,
Yeah.
the investment, and market volatility, which naturally just
Yeah.
exists and you've got to deal with when you're investing. And again, this is all in the book because it's all part of the formula. Because I talk about the basic formula, and this is the save early, cultivating that habit, having that structure in place. So now you've spoken about right protecting what you have currently, lifestyle, making sure that there is something there to protect you there. You've talked about this immediate short-term buffer. If you lose your job, it's not all panic stations. Oh my god, I've got to cash in my investments, and God knows what happens if the markets are down, and you've got to work harder for it to come back. So you've got that protection in place. when you actually get into the investment, where do you start? Obviously, tax efficiency is really, really
Yeah,
important, but
absolutely.
what's
And
your first
this
port
is
of call?
where a tailored approach is really important to that individual. So, for example, somebody in their later 50s, probably part of the reason why they're sat in front of us because they're concerned about longer term retirement planning. And so, because of that, um,
Hmm.
um, pushing money into pensions is a real kind of priority for them. Likewise, if I've got somebody in their 20s, pension planning is obviously really, really important, and there's a huge opportunity there because of time. However,
But it's
it
probably not
isn't their
their
top,
top priority.
priority.
Yeah.
Often clients in that scenario will be focused on buying or on kind of buying their first house, maybe they're moving house. And so you
Hmm.
have to take a personalized approach to this, saying that you should put 20% in pensions, 80% in kind of ISAs just doesn't work. It's all about the individual. But then as soon as you understand the individual, the idea is then we would allocate money towards ISAs, pensions. But the idea is, I'm often asked, should I be putting money into an ISA or a pension? And the answer is both. The answer is both,
Or
because
a pension.
really,
Yeah. Hmm.
absolutely, because of regular investing, and again, we are real advocates of, rather than, unless there is a significant amount of actual cash as a result of a sale of a business or an actual inheritance, we're real fans of making regular contributions, because what I like about that, it can be adapted. So the idea is having a
Hmm.
baseline level of money going into ISAs, pensions, and then being able to adapt it. So let's say if you're self-employed, it is your year end. That is a time to say, well, in addition to my regular contributions, I'm also going to put X amount into my pension. Likewise, ISAs work really well for like shorter to medium term planning. And actually, if you've picked up a bonus at actual work, it's a great opportunity to say, well, hey, now in addition to my regular contribution, I'm going to do a lump sum with the confidence that I'm not going to need that in the short term. So the idea is, we
Mm.
we just tend to keep all of our actual investment solutions really simple, really vanilla. People kind of expect that actually when you sit down with a financial advisor, there is going to be this secret, yeah, yeah,
Algebra.
and the fact that actually
Yeah.
people are investing into ISAs and pensions. The really wealthy people invest here. Actually, it just
Hmm.
isn't the case. Some of the most successful sovereign wealth funds, who are looking after trillions of pounds, often just invest into equity trackers, because when you kind of strip all of it down,
Yeah.
actually and there are certain advice firms out there who, in order to justify their actual fees, put these overly complex investment portfolios together and say, look, this is a sophisticated way of actually investing for higher net worth clients. And whenever we come across them, it's important we 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 take a data first approach. So we just say, hey, let's just analyze your portfolio and let's just benchmark it against the S&P 500. And I've yet to come across a kind of complex active fund manager who in the long term has kind of outperformed just a simple low cost equity tracker. And so the idea is, yeah.
It's interesting. It's interesting you say this because
Mm,
that can lead us down another kind of route of conversation into a rabbit hole. Because I don't know, it feels like even within the industry, it's been made even more complex than it needs to be from an investment management point of view. Whereas if you really just boil it down to what investing is all about, you look at the world, product, services, who are the companies, what are we going to need in the future, who's developing that, putting money into those companies is fundamentally what investing is really all about. Yes, there's some theory and there's some technical stuff that sits behind it, but at the core of it, it's really that simple. So you can have a look at, active and passive and whatever it might be, but fundamentally, does the vehicle get you on the way to your destination? I think that's really the
Absolutely.
core
And
question
like
to ask.
almost the way we give advice, the investment solution is almost secondary. It's just almost natural hygiene factor of, can we find a low cost, equity focused investment solution that is backed by the financial services compensation scheme. That is essentially what we're looking for. But the reason why it doesn't form a huge part of our conversation is because the most effective way to build wealth isn't finding this secret, amazing fund manager. It is all the behaviors around it. So the idea is, even if you've got something that is overly complex, long as you make regular contributions to it, you're likely to do okay. So really, whenever we step in, we are effectively refining that. But there are fundamental things people can do themselves, which is nothing to do with the investment solution. For example, making regular contributions. On the other side of this, we often challenge clients to actually, rather than cutting down spending, go out and earn more. Okay, career risk, especially somebody in their kind of 20s, 30s. There are massive opportunities to increase your income. So rather than cutting down on your on your outgoings, increase your income, because then you can go and
Yeah,
actually
100%.
spend
Yeah.
more, and you can go and invest more. So a lot of our conversations are saying, look, you are an absolute subject matter expert in this field. Have you considered consulting opportunities? Have you considered the next step in your career path? Because as a financial advisor, we're in a pretty privileged position. We get an insight into our clients' finances, family, health, career, and actually it would we'd be doing our clients a disservice if we ignored a lot of that and just focus on their investment portfolio. So really a
Hmm.
lot of our time is challenging
Yeah.
clients, not in terms of their finances, but actually, um, are you spending too much? Has kind of lifestyle creep happened here on your spending plans? Is this sustainable? And actually, from your career perspective, is there opportunities here? And these are difficult questions to put in front of clients. But actually, if we can answer those, then we can make a huge amount of progress, which is nothing to do with their investment.
I would agree with that 100% because yeah, someone once said to me that, when I was advising that, we're in the business of, yes, we deal with people's money, but actually we deal with the people, and the people are the most important thing. And I don't know whether you'll probably agree with this, but in my experience, oftentimes you will sit down with a client, and because you're having the insights to everything else, you have questions to ask. And when you ask the questions, oftentimes the person's not even thought about that question because they're so busy with 9 to 5, family, business, just the whirlwind of life, generally speaking, that outside perspective is really, really powerful and important. And even in coaching now, that's what I do, and that's the bit that I really enjoy, because it's like, okay, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? But this has been really, really good. So common themes. I think we've covered a few things here, and I think if you're watching and listening to this, these themes work whether you're earning 100,000, 180,000, 30,000, 50,000. These are generally principles when it comes to, if you're trying to get some financial structure or some financial plan around you to help you fulfill your long-term goals in life, you need to have these in place. And the first one was making sure that you can bubble wrap, protect what you currently have. I always explain this and say, look, think about the journey that you've been on. For most people, they've been on some crazy journey where there's been hardship. Unless you're from, a trust fund baby, you probably had it nice and cushy then, but that's a different life. For most of us, we've had to overcome struggles. We've had to overcome so many obstacles. We've had to, put ourselves through the ringer, learn so much, develop so much, right? So if you really think about that and you then put that into a timeline and say, right, 5 years ago, where was I? Where am I now? And you look back and you're like, hang on a second, I've made huge strides. Is it not a logical thing to say, well, actually, I don't want to go back there because nobody wants to go backwards. How do I protect this now so I can start to build from a place of strength? That's the first common theme. The second one is, like Rick has already said, building some financial habits to allow you to have that immediate financial protection in things like your emergency funds, right? So it doesn't mean that you then have to put extra pressure on yourself to take money from your investment because you haven't got the right foundations in place, right? And then you can jump into the investing and really putting money in to help you build. And crucially as well, which I've got to remember, I've got to call this one out again, is, have those short-term bucket list things to help you really ingratiate yourself in that journey that you're on. Reward yourself, pat yourself on the back, feel good about it. We all need something to look forward to, right? It's not just about work 9 to 5. That's how people feel like they're going to die, just working, working, working. They've got nothing to look forward to. So reward yourself, have those short-term goals, those bucket list things that you're like, actually, I've done this. I'm gonna do this. It makes life worthwhile living, and I think these themes are very, very important for the sake of, number one, just your psychological safety, your own psychological well-being, mental well-being, and the fact that you feel as though you're actually working towards something of benefit for the future. And those are the common things that I want to pull out. And I want to thank Rick for this conversation. Really, really great, mate. I've really, really enjoyed this. And I'm sure people have enjoyed it as well. How do people actually find you if they want to have a conversation with you or just reach out?
Sure, absolutely. Like I said, we're really keen to spread these messages. They're simple messages that actually a lot of people can do themselves. Financial education is really important to us. So the idea is, this is why we go into schools, colleges, and we start to teach this. So in terms of our kind of day-to-day business, we tend to focus on focus on pretty kind of established business owners as our actual clients, but we put out a lot of content. So you can find our firm 8 Financial Planning on our website. We've got everything from kind of blogs, content, our social media, whether that's LinkedIn, Facebook. um, um, yes, LinkedIn, Facebook are our primary channels. But I mean, I'm venturing more into kind of YouTube and being able to put together me just chatting through concepts. So that is, again, if you search 8 Financial Planning, you'll be able to find us there. But no, thank you so much for kind of giving me the opportunity to share some of this. I'm always mindful because I'm the sole advisor of our firm. We've got really limited capacity, and so we've got all this stuff that actually we want to openly share. So even though we can't take lots of clients on, if we can share this out and someone takes a part of this and makes a subtle positive change, that just compounds, just like the way investment compounding works. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you for giving me the chance.
No, no worries, mate. It's really, really good to speak to you. And look, I'm going to put all of those links down in the show notes and in the description on YouTube, so you can just click away and just go find things if you want to. Rick is actually like a neighbor of mine, and I met him through another friend of mine, Tak, and we hit it off immediately because we're both from the same background. We both see this in the same way, and so I thought it would be really, really nice to have this conversation. And it's not just me telling you this stuff. Like I said, all of this is in the book. All of this is in my book, The Money Basics: How to Become Your Own Financial Hero. It's formulaic. Basic is a formula. It stands for the 5 key principles. So everything ties into this, and there's a reason for it being that way. It's because fundamentally, when you work in the industry like Rick and I have, these are the things that you learn as a financial advisor, and this is the advice that wealthy people are getting to help grow and increase their wealth. So if you haven't come from wealth like I haven't or Rick hasn't, these are the things that we should have been taught in school, but we weren't. So you've got it in a book. You've now got it in podcast fashion so that you can go and listen to it. You can watch it. We're just trying to share this information because on YouTube, there's a whole lot of noise at the moment. There's so much noise, and there's so many people creating investment content. I've said this a number of times, but there's no fundamental fundamental understanding of the theory behind investing and the things that you need to have in place. People just say, oh, just throw it in an S&P 500. It could still be the wrong thing for you to do if you don't have all of the background stuff and all of those themes established, because you can't build a house from a shaky foundation. This is foundation stuff. So I hope you've enjoyed it. It's been a little longer than I would normally put out on a podcast, but hopefully you picked up a ton of gems. If you're listening to this on YouTube and watching this on YouTube, please make sure that you smash the like button. Share it with a friend, share it with someone that you think might benefit from this. I will try and snippet this up so there'll be reels and all that kind of stuff. If you're listening on the podcast on Spotify or any of the good podcast outlets, please give us a review. That would really, really, really help. But thank you so much. I'll catch you next one.